Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the P1 podcast with Matt and Tommy. Welcome back. It is the Australian Grand Prix edition, as Tommy does a scintillating little wave there for visual watchers over on YouTube. We got a lot to digest, haven't we, Tommy? And a lot of it happened right at the end to give us a month's worth of chit-chat before we get to Azerbaijan.
Yeah, the first bit of the race was decent, if not amazing, but we were getting towards the end of the race thinking, yeah, we've got a month to do fill content about this race, and there's a little bit, but not loads. And then Kevin Magnussen, what a G.
What a legend. Yeah, he clearly, big listener to the P1 podcast, knew the difficulties that we might have in making content. But don't worry, we won't just be reflecting on what happened in the race for the next month. I think that we will run out of topics eventually. We do have other ideas. Before we dive into the Australian Grand Prix, let's share the 5-star review segment of this podcast. If you don't know what it is, leave us a 5-star review. Tell us why. Be creative, and we may read one out at the start of the podcast. This one comes in from Briffer93. So proud of you guys for fleeing the previous venture and flourishing without having to please any management. It really makes you guys come across as genuine and down to earth and makes the whole P1 brand more appealing. Really love the work you guys have been doing. An extra special shout out to Tommy for pushing himself out of his comfort zone of being in front of the camera. They don't see the threats of me saying, you better come on camera otherwise. It's amazing to see the personality shine through with what originally brought you two together. Love. She didn't write that better. P1 forever, and hopefully we get to see Ferrari win a championship for Matt's sake in the next 5 years. I hope so. I hope I'm not going to be doing 5 more years of Ferrari pain. I can't do this anymore.
Wait long enough.
Yeah, to be fair, 5 years is only a third of what I've been waiting for a Ferrari world title. Anyway, that's by the by. Well, actually, I say that it's probably what I'm going to be bringing up in my memorable moment. So, my most memorable moment is the start, and obviously lingering in my brain is Charles Leclerc going off in the background backwards into the gravel. So, of course, the start of the race, I was buzzing. You had George Russell just sending it on the inside, which I don't think any of us thought that was going to happen. You're on the dirty side of the grid. Got a better start than Verstappen, took the lead into turn 1. And then Max was also very cautious going into turn 3 as well. Braked pretty early in comparison to the cars around him, if you actually watch the highlights. And that almost accidentally caused Hamilton to go up the inside. You could see he almost took avoiding action from when Max braked and then just sent one up the inside with one of the best moves I think we'll see all season. It was a beautiful move from Lewis. And then, of course, in the background, Charles Leclerc and Stroll come together, and Leclerc beached in that gravel. There ain't no way. If you go in that gravel trap, unless you keep good momentum and you're already angled out, no chance. You go in backwards, the tears will start flowing if you're me.
Yeah, Sergio Perez found that out the day before. But yeah, there's a lot of, or part of the carnage was the fact that you don't have runoff area here. And it was a good start to the race, exactly what we wanted. We'll go into why it didn't exactly pan out the way we probably would have wanted for a banger of a race. There we got the chaos at the end. But yeah, Charles Leclerc, goodness me, what an absolute stinker of a start to the season.
I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it.
You don't want to share your stat that you just put on Twitter. What was it, 72 points last year?
71 points from the first 3 races. This year, 6. Level on points, though, with the GOAT, Nico Hülkenberg, and now behind Lando Norris. Huh?
Wow.
I don't want to do this anymore.
That is bad, isn't it?
You thought last year was painful because, you get close to potentially winning a championship. You have some hope that maybe Ferrari take a step forward this year. And 100 steps back, perhaps? Maybe 100, 103?
Yeah, the actual incident itself, I think it's a racing incident for me. It's one of those things where I don't think you can... it's quite a lot of people, like Stroll's not exactly the greatest wheel-to-wheel racer and has a lot of incidents, but I don't think you can blame him one bit. It's just going into that corner. and 3 didn't go into 1. And Stroll kind of got squeezed between Alonso and Charles coming around the outside, and just punted Charles into a spin. And these cars are far too wide these days to get 3 wide at somewhere like Albert Park.
As much as I am a passionate fanboy and all that good stuff for Leclerc, I think I can also very much accept, as much as my brain, my heart, and every other part of me was trying to blame anyone but Charles or the universe. I couldn't bring it on myself to say it was Stroll's fault. It wasn't. Like it was just one of those things. And Leclerc just can't catch a break at the moment. And I think we just focus on next year now, build the car and see if 2024 can be the hype train that we all deserve as Ferrari fans.
I've seen so many people share that meme of Bonotto, when he was pointing at Leclerc after Silverstone, and people wrote the thing where it said, like, this is the worst season of my life, and it's like, worst season so far. There we go. He was right. I'm sure he'd absolutely take finishing second in the world title right now.
Yep.
And getting a few wins.
So would I. Moving on. Of course, that was the sort of beginning stages of the race. I can't remember what lap Albon actually crashed. I don't know if you have that in your encyclopedic knowledge, Tommy. Roughly. Okay, let's go lap 8. But Albon, of course, had that big crash, just lost the car, and he was running in a really solid,
so good, wasn't he?
Points-paying position. What was he, 8?
I don't know. I think he was higher. I think he was about 6th.
He was 6th. Yeah. He was 6th. He was running in 6th and then lost the car, hit the wall, brought loads of gravel onto the track. And it kind of brought up the question of, should the Albon incident have been a red flag? My immediate reaction whilst there, emotions high because Russell had just pit, as had, was it just Russell?
Russell and
Sainz had pit under the safety car. So Albon, so the safety car was out. Russell and Sainz reacted and said, free pit stop, lose a few track positions, but, get the hard tyres on. Fair enough. But then after that, the red flag came out. Emotions are high. We're like, oh no, we've, this whole 2 Mercedes versus 1 Red Bull ruined. Because of course, under a red flag, you can change the tyres for free. Now, on reflection, and I said this in funniest tweets, I actually think, yes, a red flag was feasible in this situation, just purely because of the extent of which the gravel was everywhere. And the fact Albon had made that mistake without any gravel on the track. Of course, if there's bits and bobs everywhere, things that can unsettle the car, it could cause a dangerous situation. So I can understand the level of cleanup that was required. So I think the red flag, I don't think it was an absolute slam dunk, can't do it any other way than a red flag, but I'm not going to go as far to say, wow, we really didn't need one.
Yeah, because there was so much gravel on the track, like it just pushed all the gravel. I mean, it was a Hulkenberg onboard, wasn't it, where we got the helmet cam and we saw all that gravel like spray onto the track. And even if you did a VSC or something, the marshals have got to get out there and the cars would have gone through maybe a few times through that gravel, which is probably not going to do much good to their tyres. So red flag. And normally we love a bit of a shake up in a race, but it was painful. It was absolutely painful because we had such a fascinating battle between the two Mercs and Verstappen, and it looked like Russell, whether he was doing it deliberately or not, I'm sure we'll maybe find out at some point, but he was kind of towing Hamilton along because Hamilton had DRS and it allowed Hamilton to stay ahead of Verstappen, who also had DRS, and those two could kind of work together. But as soon as Russell pit, it kind of ruined it. And it was a big old shame to see that red flag because, like you say, they can change all the tyres, and we thought we were just going to get a boring old run to the end.
Yeah, we all knew deep down that Verstappen was a lot quicker than both Mercedes, and in a lot of ways, it was inevitable that he would get through at some point and win the race. I don't think many of us truly believe that the Mercedes could outclass the Red Bull. But that being said, 2 was much better in that situation than 1. And having Hamilton there on his own, sitting duck, as soon as DRS was enabled, Max flew past in the rocket ship that is that Red Bull. Now the question comes in from Nuri Puri 2. Could a Mercedes have won had Russell not DNF'd? I guess the question more is about, had Russell not been taken out of position and been in that fight, let's say there was no safety car, no red flag, and that plays out.
And his car did set on fire.
Yeah, and also had finished the race as well. Yeah. I still think, no, I think it's a 90-10 sort of situation where I think if there's 100 races, Verstappen would have won about 90 of those. Mercedes maybe could have outclassed them in some ways, but that would have required Russell and Hamilton to work absolutely in synchrony. But then even then, they would have come under pressure from some kind of undercut. There would have been, at some point, Mercedes would have had to pull the trigger with one of their drivers to come in and cover off the undercut from Verstappen. Then it would have been Max on whoever stays out. Yeah. Then he would have flown through and probably had more pace. So I think Verstappen would have got at least into second at some point, and then it's easy pickings for him. So I don't think they would have won that race. It as much as the Mercedes was probably the second fastest car, marginally, this weekend, they were just nowhere near Red Bull. Max had so much in the locker. As much as I'd love to have seen Mercedes take the fight to him, and that first stint could have been incredible, they just didn't have enough.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen that pan out, but I think Max would have stayed behind maybe for the whole first stint, potentially if they had worked together. There were so many different scenarios that could have happened there. You could have had Verstappen getting past both of them, neither. The Mercs tripping over each other, the Mercedes drivers arguing about who should take the lead, and
there was a bit of that, wasn't there? Do you remember team radio?
Yeah. Did they just should they have just kept passing each other and allowing the DRS to go back, and then you kind of risk Verstappen sneaking through as well? Oh, it would have been so good, but alas, it didn't happen. So I don't think they had the pace to win. Verstappen was so comfortable out front, to the point where he pretty much fell asleep and went off at one point, and thankfully had a 13-14 second gap, whatever it was, that it didn't really matter.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, it was about 10 or 11, I think he was sitting at, and then it went down to 7 or 8. Because I remember seeing the camera shot, and I was like, oh my God.
It was when it cut to really when it was slow.
I thought he was conking out. I genuinely was like, oh my God, he's got a problem. Hamilton's going to take the lead. But anyway, back to this whole Russell-Hamilton working together, teammate rivalry, whatever you want to call it. There was that interesting moment where Russell was basically being told to manage, but then Hamilton, with those 4 DRS zones, was of course all over the back of his teammate. And it seemed as though George was getting a little bit concerned about the attack from behind. So that being said, it didn't look as though maybe they'd agreed a particular scenario or a way in which they would have worked together in order to keep Verstappen behind to win the race, which is something I feel as though maybe they should have agreed to prior and had a game plan in case they got ahead of Max. It's a tough conversation, but it depends what the drivers want. Do they want to finish second and third, or do they want to help the team potentially win? But then it's which one of those drivers would win. We already know that Hamilton wants to get a big W in the car before Russell this year, especially. Next question comes in from Fee_B63. Why on earth does a red flag equal a free tyre change or choice? Tommy?
Because them the rules. And they always have been. But yeah, it's always been that way. Sometimes it will work in favour. Most of the time it can ruin a race, and a lot of people get annoyed because I think it's happened a lot more these days, and particularly we'll go into this later in terms of entertainment purposes and how much they carry on after a red flag. But a lot of early Formula One, when you had a red flag, it was very rare that you would actually restart it. And then I guess now, because of the way tyres are so important, and you do essentially have a mandatory pit stop because you have to change tyres, you get that free pass. And we get this question every single time this happens. And it is just the way it's always been. But you can't let a car, say there's a red flag and they've gone through loads of gravel, or they've had a problem or a puncture. You can't say, well, you got to start with that puncture. And then it's like, well, should it just be that one team? Why can't everyone do it? And then you'd get more arguments. So Yeah,
that's exactly true. The whole point of there having been a red flag is probably there's been some sort of collision somewhere. You've probably got an ailing car. So say, okay, red flag conditions, and then that car is hobbling back to the pits. Sorry, can't touch the car. You're going to have to go out and cause danger for all the other drivers and then come back in the pits. That is one of the main reasons is for safety, is that, yeah, okay, well, everyone can change their tyres, fix whatever they need to do, because that is the safest way to do it. It's not fair. A lot of people say it's not fair, but Formula One isn't fair. Sometimes things will not go your way. A safety car will come out just at the wrong time. And that's just the way Formula One is. That's what creates the drama, the controversy, and sometimes strange race winners. So it is the rules. I don't think it should be changed either. There's been talk. I saw Tomo, for example, put up on his Twitter about thinking maybe the red flag should be a rolling start and then not change tyres. But I think the tyre change has to be there because of safety, as I mentioned. And red flags always have to have a standing start. It's just there is you just don't get the same feeling if you have a rolling start. Not at all.
The same. No chance. Yeah, that was what was so exciting at the end. And yeah, it's just not going to happen. I mean, everyone, we're now here kind of being annoyed by it because it essentially ruined what would have been quite an exciting race at the start with the Mercedes and Verstappen. But everyone loved it when Gasly won at Monza, and that helped him. So
didn't see him complaining about it then, did we? No, exactly. Right, Tommy, it's now time for your special moment. What's your, sorry, not special moment, that's not what it's called. It's Tommy's most memorable moment.
It is. My most memorable moment was that 0.3 of a second where we thought Nico Hülkenberg was going to get on the podium, and Matt absolutely adored this moment from the watch along.
I have not seen in my life more passion of something happening in this sport than when you realised that Hülkenberg was in fourth place. It was literally like you'd just discovered, like, honestly, unlimited cash or something. Like, it was unbelievable.
His whole career flashed before my eyes at that moment when he was going up the inside of Stroll.
You're gonna rip off your mask and you actually are Nico Hülkenberg? Like, that passion was. Is he your brother? Is he your long lost brother or something? No,
this is the thing. I just love an underdog story, and I love seeing potentially rubbish cars do well. And it would have not only been Nico Hülkenberg on the podium, it would have been a Haas podium, which would have been really cool. And in this kind of Formula One era where you don't really get a lot of unpredictable race results and people on the podium and things, it was just utter carnage. And then as soon as I realized Hülkenberg was in fourth, it was like, oh my God, he's in fourth. And Sainz was obviously ahead of him, who we thought was going to get a penalty. If it carried on, could that have happened? And then also in my head was, spoiler going into the predictions, that you'd managed to, predict biggest surprise. And we were bantering about how, oh, imagine if he got a podium, ha, ha, ha. And here we are. he was so close to being there. What a absolutely mad end to that race. But that just it was so predictable that was going to happen. Just the carnage. A track like Melbourne, where there's gravel, there's everything. The thing about a Formula One race start is everyone goes, oh, you can't win at the first corner, but when it's a 1 lap or a 2 lap shootout, you can, because that is your biggest chance to win. So of course everyone's going for the dive bombs.
Absolutely everyone went for the dive bombs. Lando Norris was interviewed after the race and said that it felt like he was going to crash at every single corner because he just couldn't get any tyre temperature. He was saying, like, even in the tyres being 65, 70 degrees, he would expect to have some sort of grip, but didn't. And the fact that was how he felt was very clear, that was a feeling throughout the whole grid. The amount of mistakes we saw at the end of that race was ridiculous, wasn't it? We had Logan Sargent taking away Nick de Vries's F1 2023 virginity because he just absolutely...
At this point, by the way, as time of recording, he still doesn't have a penalty.
Does he not?
No. And he's not even under investigation, I don't think.
How?
Correct me if I'm wrong.
He's literally entered the AlphaTauri.
It's far worse than what Sainz did. He literally just drove into the back of him like you do when you just want to take... when someone does something bad to you in a video game and you just plow into the back of them. That's exactly
So you
what
had
they did.
that. You had Perez going off. You had Sainz yeeting Alonso. You had both the Alpines crashing into each other. You had Stroll just miss his breaking point by 47 years at turn 3 as well. So you just had all of these mistakes, and it just felt like, I was like, what is going on? People, they were all just driving like it was the last lap of their Formula One career, and this is the only time they were ever going to win a race. And to be honest, it created unbelievable entertainment. And this is the next question. At EHF1_, did they red flag the race for entertainment purposes, knowing we would be left with 2 laps of madness?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion even, the FIA got scared of having a safety car till the end of the race and having another one like Monza that year. Was it last year?
Yeah, last year.
We went from, and that was a long time. We were under safety car for 6-7 laps, I think it was.
Yeah.
They didn't get their act together quick enough, and we finished the race under safety car. Now, would I prefer a red flag and a reset over finishing under the safety car? Absolutely. Would I want that if Leclerc was leading by 20 seconds? Ask me when that happens.
Yeah.
But yes, they red flagged for entertainment purposes. Of course, there is a sporting reason as well. K-Mag had hit the wall. There was supposedly a lot of debris on the track. There was a tyre on the track. Maybe could have been dealt with under just a normal safety car conditions, potentially. But that being said, they then ran the risk of running it into the final lap. So it depends how you view it. If you're a Verstappen fan, you're like, oh, well, that's a bit annoying. I wouldn't have called that as a red flag. If you're everyone else, oh, yeah, give us more red flags, please, more standing starts. But yes, I think they did. I think they definitely took into account that the safety car could have finished the race.
Yeah, 100%. And whether you like it or not, this will always be the biggest debate. And people will say, well, this shouldn't come into account because it's a sport, and sometimes things can be, football matches can be a draw or whatever, get over it. But F1 tickets are a lot of money now. People travel from all over the world to go see them. And and ending under safety car and not getting a exciting finish, you might feel a bit shortchanged. Say like at Monza, for example. A lot of people it was a massive anticlimax, Monza, when you have that late safety car, the excitement builds where you think you're going to get something exciting, and then you just finish behind a safety car. So, yeah, there's no doubt they did that. I'd be more concerned, let's just go into it quickly, that they were allowing people on the track, fans onto the track.
I don't know if they allowed them. Did they allow them? I don't remember that part.
I think they let them into the next bit. So like, you know how you have an initial bit where you go through like a barrier and then you have to go through the next bit, like through a fence. And someone had managed to get on the track. And this is as they were crossing the line on the final lap behind the safety car. And then Verstappen led the field. But yeah, there were people on the track at turn 1, a couple of people, and people hanging on the catch fencing and stuff. It was very sketchy.
Yeah, and so it was very weird to see the documentation that the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, or whatever they were called, had been summoned to the stewards. So I wonder if they'll get like a little 5-second penalty, or maybe a grid place drop for the next race or something like that. But
we'll find out.
Clearly it was something. Maybe it was
penalty
there was someone
points
that had allowed them through, because why would they summon the circuit there? Clear, because there was a lot of people there as well, so there must have been some miscommunication. But yeah, very concerning. There were some absolute wild people there, literally filming by the side of the track, and you're like, yeah, okay, it is under safety car conditions, but you never know what could happen, and these cars are still going fast enough to kill you. So
people spin off behind safety cars before, so
yeah, so you just have to be really careful. But yeah, so there will be an investigation into that, I am sure. Next question, Colin_R_Mason. Isn't it about time we go back to 90s rules of red flags where aggregate times were used? Absolutely not. That is the worst suggestion, Colin. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for getting involved in this P1 podcast. But that would ruin everything.
We don't need it more
drama.
Confusing.
The confusion, but also the drama would just go down the toilet. you would never have anything that would really spice up the action. Okay, you might have a safety car, but as for a red flag, which is supposed to be, oh, red flag, oh my God, the race is resetting. Hype builds up again. Instead, it would be, so Max Verstappen was leading by 48 seconds when the red flag was flown. So he has a 48-second advantage when the race resumes.
Everyone will love that.
No one wants that. No one wants that. I'm sorry. Maybe you, Colin, but no one else. I'm sorry.
No, definitely not. It's just not. It's just not the way it should be. It should be far too confusing.
And I love the way Colin phrases this. Isn't it about time? You can see Colin's been sat there in his armchair waiting to go back to the glory of the 90s when it was aggregate timing.
Yeah.
Was this you, Tommy? Is this,
no, certainly not.
No? Okay, fair. Even you have said no to this particular suggestion.
Said no to this, yeah.
Jack W.O. Sullivan. We might already have an answer before you can get the review out, but do you think Gasly is going to get a race ban? Now, we have had the conclusion of that, and there was no further action between Ocon and Gasly, which I'm a little bit shocked about, to be honest with you. I felt that it was deserving of a penalty. I think that perhaps there is something to be said with, one, them being teammates. That always seems to come out with a more lenient decision from the FIA, which is very odd. Maybe it's because neither party push hard for a penalty because, lo and behold, they're from the same team. So the representatives are the same. And more importantly, number two as well, Gasly, of course, being 2 points away from a race ban. And as you've said, Tommy, for quite a long time now, you think they will bottle banning anyone because 100%. It will just look bad for the sport.
Yeah, 100%. Maybe we'll do a whole podcast on this later in the week, but I just think that it's because it's quite a spicy topic, I think. But initial thoughts on Gasly getting this penalty, I'm not surprised, but I also think it should have been a penalty. I mean, he squeezed Ocon. He didn't squeeze Ocon deliberately, but he rejoined quite unsafely. And then he's just driving his normal racing line when Ocon's clearly alongside him. And he's obviously going so much slower because he's been through the gravel. And it's just, I know they're not exactly the same incidents because, say, like Carlos Sainz, for example, it's a completely different incident. But it's a similar thing in terms of just a mistake, in my opinion. And also, the weird thing is, I read into it, and one of the things that they said was, it counts as a first lap incident because it's the restart. But why doesn't Sainz's then? Because Sainz's, for me, is too harsh.
Yeah, agreed. I think that it was touch and go, whether Sainz deserved a 5-second penalty. We'll get onto the question shortly from Jamie. But yeah, taking that into account now, where Ocon and Gasly, there was no penalty coming from that, I felt as though Gasly, rejoins the circuit, but it is his responsibility to not interfere with other drivers that are clearly going quicker behind him to a level of which it makes it dangerous. And the fact that he's coming across, like, for example, Sebastian Vettel got a penalty in Canada when he crossed the grass.
Yeah.
All he did was block Hamilton, and he got a penalty for that. So you're telling me that Gasly coming over the grass, rejoining, wiping out his teammate into the wall, causing absolute carnage is not
a big
penalty.
Crash. Yeah. And it defies the most stupid thing is they've now changed the rules of penalty points, and maybe we'll do a whole podcast on this, but it's just
maybe we keep going.
Maybe we will, but I also really want to rant now about it. Maybe we'll do a podcast now.
Okay, we'll look forward to that later in the week. We've got a month to enjoy.
We've got a month to film. I'm just thinking that in my head.
Much more content, but yeah, we will get into that at another time. But hopefully, we'd love to see your opinions as well. So send them in over on social media. Matt P1 Tommy. So no race ban for Gasly. Nothing. Not even a reprimand. Just no further action. Next question.
Logan Sargent's just there like, cool. I yeeted De Vries off, and they've not even noticed.
It's literally like, because we'd hardly noticed with everything else going on, and it's like the FIA just didn't see it.
Did you see that replay? they weren't looking at that. They saw Alonso
Literally.
spinning and didn't notice me at the back, just absolutely sending it.
Oh, I love it. Next question. Jamie Rowe LFC 8. Should Sainz have gotten the penalty if Alonso still got third? Sainz got a penalty for causing a collision with Alonso and ruining his race, but then Alonso was put back into third. Surely either Alonso gets third or Sainz gets a penalty. So how this works and my understanding of it is, and I was confused at the time as well, where I've sat there going, so wait, so the lap part basically doesn't count. We go back to what it was previously, yet Sainz is still getting a penalty. But I guess on the flip side, when you look at that, if someone destroys someone into the wall, causes a red flag, and then it gets count back, you have to penalise that person. Otherwise, it just becomes a demolition derby.
AlphaTauri, if say it was another situation where Verstappen was against, I don't know, like Hamilton or Alonso for the title, they'd just deploy AlphaTauri to just yeet everyone, cause a red flag, and then it goes count back and they're fine and don't get any kind of consequence.
This is, of course, a joke from Tom Bellingham that he would never expect that from a sister team. So I thought I'd just in case you get clipped up by someone. But yeah, so I guess when you look at it that way, of course, Sainz has to get penalised or at least looked at for the incident. When we actually dive into the specifics of it, I have to remind you all, and I have to remind myself because I do not believe it's fully true, the stewards do not take into account the consequence of the incident. It's just
Logan Sargent
the actual...
taking out someone that's 19th. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Oh, well,
they're like,
19th
right, we're off. Doesn't matter, does it? Off we go. So with that in mind, and it being lap one as well, I am now more leaning towards the fact it shouldn't be a penalty than it should. After I've watched it a few times, because initially when I saw it, I went, Sainz has gone in well too hot, yeeted Alonso. Reality of it is, yes, he goes in too hot. It is the lightest of touches, which unsettles Alonso's car, goes round. I don't know. Every time I see it in my brain, I change my mind. I think it's very much could go one way or the other. But if we're taking into account what Ocon and Gasly did, and that wasn't a penalty, then this shouldn't be a penalty, in my opinion. Yeah,
because you're taking into account, is it any worse? Because if you look at Sainz's actual line, it's just the way that Alonso's come into the corner, Sainz got into the corner. I don't think he absolutely goes in hugely hot, like it's absolutely outrageous. It's just the way he goes into the corner, and then you go, well, they clearly didn't bother investigating or giving any kind of penalty to Leclerc, Stroll, and Alonso when they collided on the first lap because Leclerc went out the race. So that just shows that they are counting the fact that it took Alonso out and Sainz was gaining an advantage. But then he doesn't gain an advantage because it's all reset afterwards. And I agree. Yeah, I personally don't think it should have been a penalty, not because it shouldn't exist because the lap doesn't exist. I just don't. I just generally think if you're counting that as a first lap incident, it's just a bit of unfortunate. But then that's me kind of old school, like my IndyCar, where they just have a kind of a bit of argy-bargy without it being too over the top.
It's also worth mentioning the lap did exist. Lap 57 did happen, but they went back to what the order was before lap 57 begun, which then was lap 58 and then the formation, then it finished. Just because, I don't want to get it confused because it was a confusing situation for everybody watching that. So
one more thing to add actually about Sainz is you had the idea that Sainz could potentially back the field up a little bit because Hamilton didn't get that penalty because it doesn't count apparently behind safety car. So he could have backed up the field and then just absolutely floored it. And I remember thinking, well, that's never going to happen. But now I've actually looked at the race results. He was only half a second off a point. So it was very close because there was barely anyone in the race. He finished last and he was 12th.
This is it, right? And I've got one more thing to say about Sainz as well before we move on. Yeah, I think he could have definitely tried that. I don't know why Ferrari aren't on the blower saying, look, let's try this.
They because I don't said, we are checking, and now they're
get back this to is it. But, if surely, because Sainz is he's a clever little warrior. He knows what he's doing, and that's how he won Silverstone last year and things like that. I'm surprised he was probably, and it seemed that way on the team radio, and kind of links in with my final point. His emotion almost got the better of him. Like, he was genuinely really upset by the penalty. You could hear, I think he was actually crying. Like, it genuinely sounded like he was upset over the radio. So I wonder if that clouded his judgment in that final lap, where he's gone, well, I've thrown away P4. This is absolutely outrageous. When the reality is, I don't think, now I don't know for certain, but I don't think you had to maintain that 10-car gap, because it wasn't behind the safety car cleared off. It gone in the pit lane. So Sainz could have definitely just slowed up in the last few corners, yeeted it, stayed within his delta, and potentially got a seventh or an eighth. Because Hulkenberg, let's not forget as well, Hulkenberg conked out with a few corners to go. His car had broken down, so he wasn't rushing over the line with any kind of sauce. I don't know why I use sauce as the word, but you know what I mean. I genuinely think there's missed points there as well for Ferrari.
Dare I say, a Michael Schumacher back in the day, or even
he would have won the race
now, 100%.
For those wondering, Monaco 2012? No, 12 was when he got pole, wasn't it? 2010, when he overtook Alonso. Was it Alonso?
The final corner before the safety car line. No, it was Alonso. It was Alonso. He was in the Mercedes, and overtook him before the safety car line. But it comes back to that thing, doesn't it, of Schumacher, I've got a penalty, I'm going to take it on the last lap, and then I've already driven through the pit lane, and it counts as me finishing the race. It's that kind of always thinking. And I'm surprised that he didn't at least have a go.
Yeah, he could have tried something, because he wasn't ever going to score any points anyway, so he may as well risk getting a penalty again and get better points. But look, by the by, I'm sure he just wants to move on, to be honest with you. We now move on to biggest winner, which is either a driver or a team. So for me, I guess it depends how you measure this. Is it winner in terms of literally where they finished, or is it winner in terms of how they performed over the whole weekend? For this one, I'm going to say where they finished, and my biggest winner is going to be Lando Norris. I feel as though P6 in that McLaren is absolutely not where that car deserved to be. Obviously, there was a bit of good fortune as well along the way, with penalties and drivers yeeting into each other. But to finish P6, and I guess McLaren as a whole, P8 for Piastri, they are now, I don't want to say this out loud, they are 14 points behind Ferrari in the constructors' standings after 3 races. Yep, good. And Norris is actually ahead of Leclerc in the drivers now after this one result. So that's depression.
Wow.
Good. So yeah, there's my winner. Kind of McLaren / Norris hybrid.
I would say McLaren, just the fact that I cannot believe 6th and 8th at the end there. Madness.
Yeah, it's a joke.
Yeah, and maybe Yuki Tsunoda, that he actually managed not to finish 11th and get that point because Sainz had the penalty.
Absolutely.
I would actually have argued that if he hadn't have got that penalty, biggest winner would have been Sainz, because I think he was brilliant all weekend and actually had the better of Leclerc. But I wonder if that also played what made him so emotional. That I think it was one of his best performances for Ferrari. Even though I know the car's not there and he's won a race before, but in terms of him just like beating Leclerc and being really good, and then it's all kind of gone away from him right at the end with one small mistake that I don't think is worthy of such a harsh penalty. But there we go.
I bet he just couldn't believe it, that emotion and pleading. Like, he was literally pleading down the radio, let me speak to the stewards, let me speak to... It was not anything I've ever heard from Sainz before. We've never really heard that kind of vulnerable side from him, I would argue. So to hear that was quite sad. But yeah, Sainz deserved so much more than 12th place. It's absolutely ridiculous to say that out loud, because he was the driver of the day, in my opinion, up until lap 57 of 58. Biggest loser, driver of team. I was going to say...
Our team's got to be up there,
Ferrari is my team for biggest loser, purely because 0 points scored. I don't want to go into it any more than that. Actually, to be fair, biggest winner-ish, I want to also shout out Zhou Guanyu for getting 2 points in that Alfa Romeo. Well done. Well played. That's all I wanted to say on that matter. But yes, biggest loser, Ferrari, by I was going to say by a country mile, but no, Alpine are a close second. But yeah, what a disaster! How are they scoring 0 points after Sainz drove incredibly well, Leclerc a bit unlucky, and we move on to Azerbaijan.
Yeah, shocker. Just to be different then and throw something into the mix, I will say Alex Albon, just because I think he threw away a big result for Williams, and it's going to be for a team like Williams, and I've said it before, that you don't get many points available these days because I know this kind of goes against what's happening now because it was a chaotic race, but because of the top 4 teams taking up to 8th, there's not going to be many points available this year, I don't think. So that's a race where they should have scored big points. And for it to be a mistake as well, not even like a car failure or something, I think Alex is going to be kicking himself because he was really, I mean, if you look at the result, you'd think he'd be in 6th.
Yeah, if not higher, really. Like he might have even beaten Perez potentially. Who knows? With everything that went on. Is Albon escaping some criticism in this podcast and generally because of all the other craziness that went on that we've almost forgotten his crash at the start? Because it was a big mistake. There was no failure as far as we're aware. It was just a driver mistake, which had big consequences. Yeah,
it's one of those things that because he's in a lower team, you don't count it, but that is like that's the equivalent of like throwing away a win if say Verstappen had gone off and actually gone into the wall. That is that level for Williams because 6 to them is a victory. So it's huge from Albon. He was brilliant in qualifying and looked like he's going to be having a great weekend, but threw it away.
He did indeed. Now, let's take a look back at our predictions that we made on Thursday and see how we did. Now, Tommy, you're the luckiest man alive, is what I will say to this, and you'll know why when we go through all of these predictions. So, my biggest good surprise was Nico Hulkenberg, and I think that is a big fat point. You tried to start saying during our Twitch watch along that, if he finishes 9th, I wouldn't call that a good surprise. But he finished 7th, potentially could have had a podium. Of course, Haas did try and lodge a protest for the race results, and it got thrown out by the FIA. So no Hulk podium this time round. But yeah, Hulk definitely a good surprise, I would say. Now, let's just clarify as well. It doesn't have to be the best surprise when we say biggest good surprise. It just has to be in the realms of, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, we'll judge it and then desperately try and blag it from each other.
Yeah, exactly.
So my biggest good surprise was McLaren. Never in doubt.
You're so lucky. You are so lucky. Before lap 57, that's not on. It's just not on.
The whole weekend as well. Not
literally. Just a disgrace. Well done, Tommy. That's a point for both of us. Biggest flop. I said Perez. I would also argue that absolutely is a point. Now, people are going to go, but he finished fifth
in a Red Bull that was miles quicker than everyone.
He finished 5th in the best car of the grid. He wouldn't have finished 5th had it not been for the ridiculous stuff at the end. 7th in a Red Bull where I predicted he'd probably get top 3. You said the same. You expect him to be on the podium. Just didn't really have the pace, especially in the second half of the race. Could hardly catch Norris for quite some time. Perez obviously said over the radio, let's fix these issues, etc., etc., etc. But I still think it's in the realms of flop territory. So I'm taking a point, Tommy.
And if we hadn't have had that restart, he'd have been last again because he went over the grass and was off.
Very true. Yeah, definitely flop.
Yeah, he was doing a lot of lawn mowing this weekend. So I think this one is like half-point territory.
This is contentious.
It is very contentious. And I'm not just doing this to be an idiot. This is genuinely like he had the best, probably like the best race of his Ferrari career and then bottled it with a mistake.
So I guess,
where do you call it?
If we're talking about what a flop is, that's a big flop. It's a big come down from... But do you know what I mean, though? Like,
yeah.
Like that's an enormous flop.
Yeah, he flopped. He
Like,
boy did he flop.
I will happily give you a point for that.
Yeah,
because
he did.
It's the flop of all flops.
He flopped through the field.
Yeah,
he was there, ready to be, praised, and then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was great on the hard tyres, but then flopped. Right. Yeah. We now move to pole position. I said Alonso. I think I should deserve half a point for just being a G. But no, I get no points for that. And Tommy, you're boring as hell and secured a point. So I know exactly what your game plan is from here on in. So well done for the point on that one, Tommy.
Yeah.
And then top three. My top three was Verstappen, Alonso, Perez. That's 1 point for me.
And I was very fluky and went Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, and that's actually 2 because Alonso got his P3 back.
So you got 2, 3, 4, 5 points at the moment. And then we had our one crazy prediction where I said everyone lines up in their grid box correctly. And I saw a few of you message me on social media. I appreciate when I was trying to argue. Well, I wasn't trying to argue. I was telling you the reasons as to why Verstappen didn't get a penalty for his grid box placement. And people thought that was because I was trying to protect my one crazy prediction. No, it was the fact that a lot of people were questioning Max's position at the restart in the grid box, but it was completely legal.
Can you imagine, though, if he'd ruined it on the last lap? I mean, you'd have taken it because it would have been exciting.
It would have been, it would have been exciting. But yeah, so I get a point for that. And Tommy?
I said a Red Bull beaten in qualifying, and yeah, Perez had a shocker.
Perez got beaten by everybody in qualifying. Which
I was Lewis Hamilton in second away from a clean sweep. That's mad. Maybe that is actually mad. I genuinely didn't
crazy.
Think. Yeah,
I mean, I'm going to say that half of these are the luckiest things I've ever seen.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, you've done it. Like, I mean, fair play to you. Like that, well played, Tommy. That's a lot of points. That's 6 for you, and 1, 2, 3, 4 for me, which means 11-9. I think. Yeah, I think it's 11-9. We'll update it on the next predictions video for sure. So well done, Tommy. Congratulations on that. Amazing predictions. Let's see how good we are for Azerbaijan in a month's time. And we're going to talk about every single driver next time, tomorrow, in fact, in our F1 to 10 driver ratings for the Australian Grand Prix. So be sure to listen to that podcast over on Apple, Google, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, or over on YouTube. We will have the energetic edit over there as well if you want something more visual. Tommy, what is your final thought?
My final thought is that...
No, don't do it. Just say something.
Just say something.
Say something.
Say something. Well done, Melbourne.
It's Melbourne, for God's sake! Like, just that's my final thought. Say it properly, okay? I got taught by the Australian folk, so you do too. Stop being horrible. And Melbourne. Anyway, thank you, everybody. We'll see you very soon for another piece of content. Don't worry, we'll be keeping you company over the next month whilst we have the drought of Formula One racing. You will have myself and Tommy to listen to and watch over the course of April. So we'll see you very soon. Bye.
My final thoughts is there's still tickets for the live show if you're living in London.
If you want to come and see us, we've got a few tickets
15,
left.
20 left, if that.
And we're going to be talking lots probably about what happened in Australia as well, because that'll be fun, won't it? Bye!
Bye!